Thank you very much for this warm welcome. Sorry, it is such a pleasure to be here today, and I really have to say I love what I have seen so far. This event is a true celebration of knowledge and innovation and a hub of inspiration, so thank you for having me. I would like to talk today a little bit about the challenges of cybersecurity in space and give you a slice from a legal and regulatory perspective. Since I have a legal background, a short disclaimer from my side: the information and opinions presented today are solely my own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions and views of the Liechtenstein government or administration, and this presentation is for informational purposes only and not intended as legal advice. Having said that, I would like to... Sorry for the slides. Are they coming up? Yeah, okay. Having said that, I'd like to take the chance to quickly introduce you to my country. So, as you heard, I come from the beautiful Principality of Liechtenstein. So I have to move back now one slide. So, who of you could point out Liechtenstein on a map? Very good. Have you ever visited Liechtenstein? Oh, really? Good. It's beautiful, no? So, for all the others, let me give you some facts. Liechtenstein lies in the heart of Europe, right between Austria and Switzerland. We are a principality with His Serene Highness Prince Hans Adam II being the reigning prince of Liechtenstein and head of state, whereby he has ceded the state affairs to his firstborn son, hereditary Prince Alois. With our 160 square kilometers, Liechtenstein is the sixth smallest country in the world by area. So the longest distance you can take, like from is about 24.7 kilometers, so that's almost 16 miles. Vaduz is our capital, where around 5,700 people live. In total, we have 39,000 people living in Liechtenstein, but 40,000 people working in Liechtenstein. So a lot of people come in every day from Austria, Switzerland, and also from Germany. Our biggest economy sector is not, as one would think, the financial sector, which is only the third biggest sector, but the manufacturing industries with big companies like Hilti, Tyson Group Steering, and also Oerlikon Balzers, which has actually helped already with the Apollo 11 mission that took mankind for the first time to the moon. We are a highly economically liberal country with numerous advantages. You won't find any unnecessary burdens. Rather, we as an administration see us more as a service facilitator with, so to say, very short ways, which enable us to act very swiftly. You might wonder now what such a little principality has to do with space. Well, that's actually a longer story that started already decades ago, but to cut it down to two current circumstances is that we are the notifying administration of a big satellite project, Revada Space Networks, you might have heard of, and we are fulfilling our international obligations based on international space law, in particular by establishing a National Space Act. So why is space so important? Why is space communications and in particular satellite communications so important for all of us? We heavily rely in so many aspects on satellite communication of our daily lives. Whether it be satellite-based navigation route services for route planning to avoid collisions of air, water or rail vehicles, we synchronize power grids and provide highly precise timestamps and location stamps for reliable financial transactions, agriculture, commercial fishing, offshore energy exploration and development, first responder services, weather forecast, climate change research, the military reconnaissance, broadcast programs, internet access in hard-to-reach areas. Our lives would not be the same without these services. The demand for such services has grown significantly in the past years, and in fact it will continue to grow considering the further developments, for example in automated cars, planes and ships. And yes, this also means that it's getting very crowded up there. Already now we have thousands of satellites orbiting our Earth. And with the growing demand, the number of satellites is growing too. In the upcoming years, companies like Starlink, OneWeb, Amazon, Revada, they are all planning to further launch a significant number of satellites, mega constellations into space raising the number of satellites up to approximately 57,000 satellites additional. Because space contains already now thousands of satellites, both active and inactive. And these satellites are hosting thousands of space-borne transponders communicating with Earth. Some of them have been launched in the 1970s, 1980s and 1990s and are already technically outdated and several technology generations behind. At the same time, we see a rapid commercialization of space going hand in hand with a significant progress in the space industry regarding innovation and technology. At the end of the day, no matter how old or new a satellite system is, they all have one thing in common. One of our biggest challenges, one very particular and pressing challenge that demands more of our attention is the complex world of cybersecurity. Space operations and interconnected space systems are increasingly targeted by cyber attacks. These threats are a significant concern if, for example, a spacecraft uses outdated software and operating systems. Each satellite and ground station becomes a potential target. In geopolitical tense times like these are very serious potential threats. Let's have a quick look at the primary points of access for exploitation and attack of cyber assets. We have the satellites, the space segment, the link segment, and the extended land-based infrastructure, including the ground segment, terminals, and end users. But what is most vulnerable is actually the supply chain. When you look at all the cyber attacks targeting the space industry, most started from a compromised supplier of the alleged victim. The thing is that manufacturers often use commercial satellites, often use off-the-shelf technology to make the costs more reasonable. And it's not so difficult then for hackers to screen these components for vulnerabilities in open source technology and software. Speaking in general, there has been a significant increase in open source software supply chain attacks over the past year. For the space industry in particular, the supply chain has become the weakest link. An impressive example for such an attack was the Viasat cyber attack at the very beginning of the war in the Ukraine. A war that was not just started by a physical invasion, by starting a ground war, but also by using the cyberspace and starting a cyber warfare. The attack was actually not conducted on the satellite itself, but by using a DDoS also for many other countries in the European Union, a massive collateral damage, for example in Germany, where thousands of wind turbines went offline for weeks. And fun fact, at least one vulnerability the hackers exploited to conduct the hack was already uncovered in 2019 in the VPN terminals. As you can imagine, this attack raised an extensive debate regarding the cybersecurity of space systems and the protection of critical infrastructure from an industrial, political, military, and also a legal perspective. And talking about the legal perspective, you might wonder if this isn't regulated. Aren't there rules and regulations to somehow help enhance cybersecurity in space? Remember in how many different ways we rely on satellite communication. This is critical infrastructure, right? So there should be some enforceable rules. Well, in fact, cyber threats have long been overlooked in public policies and have only started recently to be discussed for space and defense policies, still leaving gaps to ensure the proper cybersecurity in space. This means defining these space assets as critical infrastructure is not a set legal standard yet. So, what is the status? From a space law perspective, it all started with the 5 UN space treaties. But they come from a time when cybersecurity was not an issue and not a discussion topic. Nowadays, we have some key players which play an important role promoting international cooperation on space and cybersecurity. In particular, the UN Committee on the Peaceful Uses of Outer Space, the Corpus, the UN GGE, a group of governmental experts dealing with cybersecurity issues, and of course the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union. All of these are important platforms for addressing cybersecurity issues. However, work on this level is very slow and takes time, a lot of time. From a European perspective, you might have heard that the NIS 2 directive, the Network and Information Security Directive 2, will enter into force next year. And this directive considers for the first time space as a critical sector, but so far only addresses the ground segment. And also, other states are on the way and having discussions on how to best include the space sector in cybersecurity policies and at least define them as a critical sector. So what you will find today are recommendations and guidelines, some more general, some more specific for the space sector, all very well developed and very helpful, but guidelines. They are not legally binding and they are not enforceable. The thing is, though, that we find ourselves in a new space race. Costs are an important factor, and notably cybersecurity does not always get the attention it should. The progress made towards establishing a legal framework for cybersecurity in space so far is slow, and the reality is that it is still a long way to go despite the first steps that have been taken. So what we need is on the one hand, a multilateral approach reflecting the necessary cooperation and coordination among various stakeholders to address the complex and evolving challenges associated with the protection of space infrastructure. And on the other hand, we need national laws that enable us to enforce these rules. The main factors for such a framework are to facilitate international cooperation and collaboration on cybersecurity in the space sector, because through international agreements we can establish common legal frameworks and harmonize cybersecurity standards to promote information sharing, joint incident response efforts, and coordinated actions against cyber threats. Space assets like satellites are critical infrastructure. We need to treat them as such, and we need to include them in our policies as such. This also means that we need to make cybersecurity compliance mandatory and create a sense of accountability for organizations and individuals in the space sector. We need to empower regulatory bodies and agencies to oversee the compliance with cybersecurity standards in this sector. Facilitating information sharing between public and private entities, collaboration that allows the exchange of threat intelligence, cybersecurity best practices, and incident response strategies are key. All of this and more should be included in a legally binding framework. I'm aware that not everybody is happy with new laws, more rules, more compliance obligations, some stating how costly the implementation is. I even once heard the argument that it is in everyone's interest to do what they can to mitigate cyber attacks, so the use of guidelines would be sufficient rather than over-regulating. Well, of course it is in everyone's interest, but it doesn't mean that everything possible is done to mitigate these cyber threats. And talking about costs, I would like to cite a friend of mine. If you think that the implementation of cybersecurity regulations and compliance with it is costly, well then try not compliance. Moreover, and I'm not just saying this because of my legal background, but from a broader perspective, legal requirements demonstrate a commitment to cybersecurity and the protection of critical assets and data in the space sector. When the public sees that laws are in place to safeguard their interests, that enhances their trust and confidence in space-related activities. This trust is vital for fostering investment, encouraging innovation, and ensuring the continued growth and development of the space sector. Laws are an important part to make our world and space more cybersecure. And because it is so important, I'm very happy and with a little sense of pride that in fact Liechtenstein is taking a step forward on this with our Space Act and Ordinance entering into force on the 1st of January 2024. We do cover also cybersecurity requirements. And that is something I'm really very happy about. Of course, laws cannot eliminate cyber threats. And at the end of the day, many stakeholders, as this event shows, are needed from various areas to help mitigate these risks. But legal obligations provide the necessary foundation for establishing cybersecurity practices, ensuring compliance, and promoting a culture of security. Legal obligations in cybersecurity are your trusted allies. So it is up to us all to collaborate and harness the collective energy and diversity required to advance cybersecurity in space to the next level. Thank you.